All right, hello, art appreciators. Today I'm going to be going over chapter one of the Mark Getlein book, Living with Art. I'm going over the slides. They will also be posted to Canvas. Yeah, just chapter one today. So here we go. Let me hit play. Okay, yeah, here we go. Let me make sure that it's sharing and you guys can see it. Okay, you can. Okay, so this is how I like to kick off this first lecture is with a quote from one of my favorite movies. All good things come by grace, and grace comes by art, and art does not come easy. This quote is from one of my favorite movies from the 90s. It is called A River Runs Through It, and it is by Reverend Norman McLean. I say the Reverend, I think I know his father was a Reverend, but this book and movie, A River Runs Through It, this is a quote from the book, and it's repeated in the movie. Great movie, and I just think it encapsulates a lot of I don't know, the beauty around art, and also the idea that it might be a little bit of work. Another one of my favorite quotes is inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us show up and get to work. So, yeah, I don't know. Sometimes art is work, sometimes it is grace. Well, it's always work. But yeah, in any case, there's my quote. So, this is Art Appreciation, Chapter 1 with Professor Wright, me. And I also like to kick off with this joking slide of the Ninja Turtles, the four masters, Leonardo, Raphael, Donatello, and Michelangelo. Yeah, I don't know if you knew that the turtles were named after these guys, but yeah, we'll come back to them later. But yeah, it's a good way to kind of give it, it's relevant. It's pop culture. Yeah, it's with you. So, in any case, yes, day one, we're talking about, our book is called Living with Art, and that's what we're going to be talking about for the duration of this course. And yeah, so let's talk about what that means. What do you think of when you think of art? Reflect kind of on your past experiences. Normally when I'm in class I ask students to do this, or we have like a discussion post online, but where you can answer. But for the most part, in it right now, just listening, just think to yourself, what do you think of when you think of art? Is it good? Is it bad? You're allowed to think bad things. But whatever you think of, it's probably a pretty visceral experience. Art is all around us. It's got a complex meaning. Most people are sort of conflicted when they think of this. They either just absolutely love it, or there's some sort of complex negative feeling, or like it's good in some ways, bad in others. Is a complex category. So that's why we have a class over it. But just in case, think to yourself, what you think of when you think of art, and then also for later. Again, this is usually a discussion-based question, but I'm just kind of laying it out there in this platform for now, so for you to think to yourself about. Can we get what is being communicated by a piece of art in just a few seconds with a piece of art, or is it something that you need to spend time with? Reflect on that. Is it an instant thing, like when you see it, or is it something that takes more time? So I don't know. Think about these questions. You can write them down to yourself if you want to pause and write down just something. It's handy notes. It's good stuff. Anytime during this video that you want to pause and write some things down, I encourage you to do so. So I'll try to remember to say that in each video. But in any case, yeah. So why do we talk about art? Why do we talk about what it is? It's the reason we have this class, and the reason it's such a complicated thing is because at the end of the day, all human cultures, as far back as we can observe, have lived with art. As far back as we know, people have made art. Before they wrote things down, they made art. Also, I like to point out that learning to write is a form of art. It's a communication done through symbols, right? Another reason I like to teach this class, and something, especially when we get to elements that I point out, is that everyone has made art. If you know how to read and write, that's art in and of itself. It's a communication. It's a system through visual creation of a thing. So in any case, yeah, we've all done it forever and ever. It's one of the earliest things we do. Everybody does it. So why though? Do we do it for pleasure, like entertainment? right? That's a part of it. Do we do it for ritual and magic? Of course. Do Does that ritual and magic overlap with pleasure? Certainly. Does ritual entertain us? It does. It keeps us occupied. It also, though, keeps us disciplined. It keeps us tied together. Keeps us responsible to each other. And art, in some ways, does that. It creates a sense of something bigger, uh, as well as something that makes us happy. So that's the first two, and then the last one, advice, instruction. We already talked about writing being a form of art, and by all means, I like to think about like some of the earliest forms of art. We have the cave paintings and stuff, and we don't really know at the end of the day what those are. Are they rituals? Are they not? But I like to think like, well, maybe before writing, that was a way of saying, hey, if you pass this boundary, there's a giant lion over there, and he'll eat you. Or maybe if you go into this valley, there's some like really good plants over here that will keep you safe and healthy, right? These kind of things we don't know exactly in the ancient world, but this is obviously a reason. When we look at a stop sign, that's a visual, or even if we don't have the word stop in it, you see an octagon with red on the inside, it means stop, and it's going to keep you safe because it's instructing you to stop. So it's something bigger than just pleasure and magic. It's also advice, and it can be an overlap of all of these things. Using meaningful images and forms to construct order and structure, explore aesthetic possibilities, just learning about the world around you, all that stuff. It's all part of human nature. Learning, communicating, breaking things down, all of it. Uh, Digesting things. It's all part of our human impetus. So we look at some of the oldest artworks in the world that we know of. It's always important to know that just because they're the oldest ones we know of doesn't mean they're the oldest ones that were. There were probably others that could predate these. But we talk about cave paintings. Obviously, 30,000 BC is one of the oldest forms of art that we have, and we don't know exactly why it's here, but we know they were looking at animals, they were looking at things that happen in the world and around them, and they were recording them on the side of cliff faces inside of caves. It's amazing. Also, we have artwork, and again, yeah, with that first one, we don't know. Is it instruction? Is it ritual? Uh, is it just for fun? We don't know, but we do see here also going forward in time a little bit to 11,000 BC. It's funny to say forward in time to 11,000 BC. That's crazy old. But we see what is to us known as one of the first pieces of art that, by all evidentiary, information that we have, it's got to be for uh, ritual or just for fun, right? This is and it's also one of the first like objects that we know is like sculpted that doesn't have a function anyway. I guess that's what I mean by that is, it wasn't a weapon, it wasn't a staff, it wasn't a jar, it wasn't anything. It was just a sculpture that someone made of these reindeer swimming. It's a part of the mating ritual of reindeer. They go through water, and often the male chases a female through the water. It's a part of it, and someone in France in 11,000 BC observed this and carved it into this little stick or wand type thing. And by all accounts, it seems like one of the first sculptures that exists without function. And while we're talking about that, I think it's important. I like to teach a lot about ceramics, obviously being a potter, and the fact that all art objects were not just for ritual communication, advice, whatever. They also could form everyday functions. In fact, ceramics, which is mostly considered an art nowadays, handmade ceramics, is often credited as being one of the main reasons we went from being nomadic hunter gatherers to being able to settle, because you could start putting stuff in a thing and keeping it away from bugs and the outside elements, and kind of you could save things. And so it's amazing to think about that. But the art of the object is not lost. Here, this Iranian ceramic piece from about 5,000 to 4,500, obviously I guess that's the sixth millennium BC, right? Yeah. Uh, no, fifth millennium BC. Anyway, we see here that it has a lot of art to it as well as function. Obviously, it could contain things, maybe water, maybe something being cooked, maybe grain if they had a lid for it, whatever. But at the same time, maybe it contained antelope meat. Right? Maybe that's what they put in it. They have these antelope or reindeer, or whatever they are. Maybe that's what was in there. Not antelope, yeah, definitely some sort of antlered animal. But in any case, We see patterns, we see animals, we see decoration that elevates it into art, but it doesn't lose its function. Okay, so talking about this, what does an artist do? What is their job? Now, you'll notice later in assignments, I will ask you what the jobs are of artists. This is what I'm referring back to. What are some jobs? And we reiterate these kind of ideas several times in the first couple chapters, but I want to start by talking about these specific jobs. The first thing that artists often do is create a space for some human purpose. So that usually means something ritualistic or discipline, like traditional, cultural, right? And we have specifically megaliths, like Stonehenge, that's like large stone or wood structures that are put out in fields that are clearly not just some structure, but something that people would go to. And like the building of them is visual and instructional as much as it is architectural. So we have those kind of things, and often they're not even architectural at all; they're just visual, and it's like Stonehenge. But we also have churches, which are very architectural, but also very ritualistic, very specific point of purposes. And when I say churches, I'm also referring to temples, synagogues, any kind of like Buddhist temple or shrine or any of that kind of stuff. It's all about the fact that it's an architectural structure built for the specific purpose of a spiritual visit or a spiritual activity or ritual activity. Just in general, also looking at the third point here, we have spiritual, ritual, and commemorative purposes. You think about here we have the visual of the 9/11 memorial, which is moving to most people, especially if you live through, if you're old enough to remember when it happened. It's a pretty specific commemorative structure that communicates differently to different people, but obviously has a very specific purpose. I was learning just last week about the Alamo, and the cenotaph is up for considering moving it just a few feet. They would still have it there, but it's like very upsetting to people. This visual, artistic wall thing is going to be moved. If you're interested in that, you could look it up. But yeah, these spaces being created are for some purpose that is about us, about our culture, about our inside, our spirit. Uh, that is one of the first jobs of the artist. So, does any structure or building have art to it? Let me think. That's not a rhetorical question. No. Yeah, I think so. We look at McDonald's right here, and it very clearly has some visual elements. Not only is it colorful and bright and obviously like trying to be a happy place, but also even before I could read, I knew that those two golden arches meant food, meant kids meal, meant whatever, also a playground, a play place, like all of these visual elements, and the fact that they chose to make the walls into windows also shows that yeah, it's trying to get the color, it's trying to say something visually as much as it is a structure that something happens inside of. What about this guy right here? Well, I don't know, when you think of tall glass buildings, usually it has a really specific, especially like if they're tall and have very small, like kind of office type windows, it has a specific purpose. This is not, it has a purpose, the function of being a place where people go to the office, but also now they want to, I would say this building here, they want to kind of elevate that idea. This is not just an office building, it's a beautiful building, and you see it and that stuff is happening here, exciting, kind of advanced, like groundbreaking things are happening inside of this structure here, because it's not just glass. Although this building is beautiful in its own way, it's striking, it's strong, it has all that glass, and it's visually communicating. Again, that it's an office building because of the visuals that are in it, but they took that to the next level. They really took the art to the next level. They call this the Egg in London. It's a pretty cool building. But yeah, this sort of spiral movement, it just they use lines, they use form to kind of say something more than just an office building, but it's also very clearly an office building, which means just the aesthetic of the old buildings clearly communicates something. But in any case, that's job number one. Job number two is to create extraordinary versions of ordinary objects. And one of the first things I think of when talking about this is the Holy Grail by Monty Python. It's not just by Monty Python. It comes from something more important. Most people know now that the Holy Grail is supposedly the cup that Jesus drank from at the Last Supper, and it has been through many iterations as an art object, as a spiritual object, whatever it is. But in any case, as a functional thing, it's just a cup. But as a piece of art, it means so many different things, and that's the artist has taken this simple thing. And this is a storyteller artist. This is the maker of the cup. Whatever it's art has elevated this cup to be something more, and we have seen it repeated throughout time. So Indiana Jones, if you've ever seen the Indiana Jones movies, you know there's this sort of whole thing about the elaborate cup is not the one that Jesus drank from. Jesus was humble, so Indy knows like, oh, it's the humble cup. It's not the fancy one, and so he drinks from it, and he's safe. It's not poison or whatever. It's all this whole elaborate thing you'll have to see to understand. But at the end of the day, that scene plays a lot with the visuals around this idea of the story of the Holy Grail. But we also have, looking here at this middle slide, we have what is potentially or considered to be the real thing. I believe it's housed in Spain, and I'm not going to say the name of it because I forgot to label where it's below the PowerPoint here. But in any case, this is supposedly the original Holy Grail. It's very immaculately decorated. It's gold. It's full of gemstones and precious things. It kind of goes against what they were saying in Indiana Jones, but it's no less, obviously a cultural object. Now, that said, we also have, as I kind of jumped right to a minute ago, the Holy Grail by Monty Python. Monty Python and the Holy Grail is a farce. It is a satire. It kind of makes a joke of this whole thing. The cup really doesn't have much to do with the movie, but it kind of uses it as the impetus for this long Arthurian joke. But in any case, all different forms of art, all around this simple sort of semi-functional art object, right? But in addition to this, we also have tapestries and decoration that are considered art objects. Just go to Hobby Lobby, or market any of the like World Trade Centers in Dallas. There's tons of things that we put around our lives, around our houses that are ordinary objects that we just decide are extraordinary or meaningful to us. We also have clothing. And yeah, the next slide. Yeah, so we have fashion. This is a tapestry here, a kente tapestry. This fabric on the right, it kind of goes with the idea that it's just a pattern. It's just a fabric, but it's very meaningful to people who might connect with it. You can think about it like an American flag or something. That's a tapestry that, as an American, we connect to. If you're related to a culture that uses kente patterns from Africa, this is very meaningful to you. But we also have the things that we put on our body. Every one of us have made a decision if we leave our house to think about what we put on ourselves that communicates something to other people. We make decisions, even if that decision is that you don't care. That's a decision about the clothing you put on. The art of yourself is saying something to other people. And then of course we have like the big fancy highfalutin stuff like McQueen and Gucci and all those big fashion names. That's obviously making an art out of the things that we put on ourselves. But yeah, these are ordinary everyday things that we give meaning to because we can, and they're art. What about a chair? Think about that. If you could a chair have visual art? I know this is becoming a little silly and rhetorical at this point, but let's talk about a few different chairs. Number one, yeah, check that out. This chair means a lot. If you're a fan of fantasy and Game of Thrones specifically, this chair means you basically rule the world. You are the leader of Westeros. It's a terrifying looking chair. If you read the story, it's also a dangerous chair to sit in, not just because it's literally sharp, but also because people are gunning for you, all these things. But at the end of the day, it symbolizes power. And really, at the end of the day, it symbolizes this like fantastical idea of this fun, entertaining world that we've created, or that George Martin created for us to enjoy. But it clearly has visual meaning, the art of it. Now, what is this? This is basically, for all intents and purposes, the real life Iron Throne. This is the coronation chair in Westminster Abbey. The stone at the base of the chair, according to Celtic legend, is the rock that Jacob slept on Beit Isle, Bethel. But in any case, this chair is the chair where any royal who's going to become the king or queen of England sits during the ceremony that crowns them, the coronation or the crowning of these royals, is encapsulated in this simple, very actually like uncomfortable looking chair. I wouldn't call it simple necessarily, but it doesn't look comfy. It's definitely not meant to be sat in for leisure. It is about power and work, and it's like the real Iron Throne, like I said. This guy right here, though, okay, so we're getting more comfortable. It's a little less official, but you look at this, and usually I usually during these it's a conversation, but I'm going to point out, leather and wooden chairs, especially with those sort of like several leg kind of axis down here at the bottom. It moves, it spins, all that stuff. There's a tendency we see this and we think of like an office. Now it's an office that's trying to be somewhat casual or comfortable, but at the end of the day, it's not really meant to be just like a leisure chair. It probably is in a place where there are meetings or appointments or things like that. So the wood and leather kind of, for me, lends to that. Maybe other people have different interpretations. But then we compare that to this guy right here, not an Iron Throne, not a work chair. This is really not about the aesthetic at all, although the aesthetic, when you look at it, does mean you're about to be comfortable. You're about to enjoy some TV or pretend to while you take a nap. Maybe. I don't know. But at the end of the day, the fact that it's not aesthetic is an aesthetic of its own. So, yeah, chairs, ordinary objects. Okay, so job number 3, recording and commemorating history, peoples, and events. Okay, so recording uh, events that happen throughout history is obviously going to be one of our number. It's the whole reason we have this class is the art, or the second half of this class at least. There's lots, like the majority of history that we know prior to writing, especially we know because of the art that was made recording things that happened. And it does make it hard to parse out like what's real and what's not, what's recorded. We'll talk about job number 4. It's like recording cultural ideas, not historical, but sometimes those kind of overlap. But in any case, looking at these art pieces, we have the Lion Hunt of Ashurbanipal, which is this first piece here, kind of in the middle. I'm going to work right to left here. Ashurbanipal was king of the Assyrians, and he had this big event where he killed a bunch of lions. Now those lions were mostly old and probably missing teeth and claws and sedated and things. But the lion represented the other Persian kingdoms, Sarmatians, maybe? No, I don't know. But the other guys outside of the area of Assyria that were kind of their enemies, and by killing these, he not only asserted his royalty but also his dominion or his dominance over the powers around him. Right, and this event was recorded in these specific relief tiles that are spread across the Middle East, the ones that we have left anyway. But yeah, we see here he may have been an Akkadian king of Assyria. But yeah, the history there is recorded here in this. But in any case, we have that, and then we also have. It's interesting here. I threw these in. That was a person and a historical event in a specific moment. But there are these 2 other historical figures. That, yes, this is where I'm kind of saying the line between cultural or spiritual and historical gets a little blurred, because the Pietà by Michelangelo here records the death of Jesus and Mary holding Jesus after he has passed. And the fact is that Jesus did live, did die. And we don't know necessarily what Mary looked like as she held him as he died, but we know that the event happened, and it is recorded and commemorated here in this visual sculpture by Michelangelo. So this is a historical representation of a person, and it just happens to have spiritual significance, which then you go to also here on the left, the Battle of Uhud with Muhammad. Now, this is interesting because in reality, if it was a spiritual piece, we couldn't have a picture of Muhammad. Muhammad in Islamic art would not be represented by a person. There wouldn't be an animate object. It would be only calligraphy, the stuff at the top and bottom. But because it's a historical piece, now, it's the actual recording of the thing that happened with Muhammad present. In general, this depiction of animate figures is historical for sure rather than spiritual, because, like I said, Islamic art doesn't have figures. But in any case, that's recording and commemorating history. And then, of course, yeah, there's this very specific event that's been recorded in many, many ways, many artistic pieces. But yes, Washington crossing the Delaware here, recorded heroically. I kind of have my doubts that it would have looked like this, that he would have stood like that, and all these things. But it's recorded and commemorated uh, in this piece, that actual event of Washington crossing the Delaware. Now, to go to number four, this is where I said that this one kind of blurs with the last one, giving tangible form to the unknown. Now, these are ideas like recording events that are cultural, they're spiritual, they're real things that happened. Or the real things that are described, I should say, like Adam, the person, God, almost like a being, but we don't know what they looked like and exactly how it happened. So we create an image that represents it, looking like a person that we would see and understand what's happening. But at the end of the day, it's recording a somewhat intangible idea. Now, characters and spirits are also a part of this. Stories that are pseudo historical, a lot of like Viking stories and stuff. Uh, Thor, the story of Thor is told very specifically like he's a person, but what we see as Thor, what we think of as Thor, is not really like that, in any case. But yeah, here's some other versions. Characters like Shiva and also Durga and Vishnu, these kind of people or these kind of spirits are given form in art, even though this is not exactly necessarily their form. We also have things like the zodiac symbols, horoscope, things like this, where it's a cultural idea and it's intangible in that it's time and there's not really like a year that there's a dog and a year there's a snake, all this sort of stuff, but we give it symbols, we give it concrete imagery so that we can understand and have that system, because at the end of the day the system is real. We have years, we have months, it is a thing. But visually we have to tie it to something, or we choose to tie it to something, and it helps us, understand these systems better. Now, so it's a tough thing, because now number five is also giving tangible form, but to intangible things. So these are all things that we can describe as real things, and we do in art, but they're not. They represent ideas that aren't necessarily concrete. But then we have art. The fifth job of the artist is to give tangible form to feelings and ideas. So these are not cultural, they're not spirits, they're not characters and stories. They're literally totally indescribable things that we can't, they're intangible ideas like feelings and ideas, and we give them form. We give sadness form, we give anger form, we give, I guess you could say the zodiac thing is like giving time form, maybe concepts, but at the end of the day time is somewhat tangible. It does exist, we have to work within it. But concepts like proximity, concepts like tension, things like that, they're too abstract for us to just necessarily sometimes just describe. We can make a visual representation of that. This represents movement. This piece here, Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night, we have the movement of the spirals, the sky, the gloominess of night, all that stuff. Actually, I even like to point out that this is it encapsulates the emotion of sadness, in that Van Gogh, as I understand, painted this painting after his mother died, and he had this concept of all of our spirits moving into the sky, and everyone who'd ever died is in the night sky above us, sort of swirling and being a part. And especially as they leave, we get a glimpse of them. And he was painting it as if we could see all these people that had been before us. And then there's this sort of monolithic solitary tree thing it's way bigger than the city below it. What does that represent? What does that mean? It's an abstract idea of loneliness, or solitude. That's the word I'm looking for. But yeah, in any case, these are sort of intangible feelings and ideas that Van Gogh painted for us. But and then we also, of course, even more intangible, there's nothing we recognize here. But again, I usually open this discussion. There's chaos, there's busyness, there's movement, there's sharpness, there's color, there's intensity. I don't know. There's all kinds of things here that are more like feelings and ideas. This is not a system. This is not a character. This is tangible form to what's inside of us. It's not something we can describe. In any case, that gets us through. Those are the five jobs of the artist. So yeah, you can go back and kind of repeat those. I guess it was creating places, creating objects, tangible form to, or recording history, then tangible form to characters and stories and systems, then tangible form to feelings and ideas. Those are your five jobs. In any case, moving on to that and to sort of close today, what is creativity? Creativity is broadly defined as the ability to produce something that is both innovative and useful within a given context. Now, that's not always necessarily true. It doesn't always have to be useful, although useful could just be for you. You feel better. That's a useful, it's a limited social context because it's just you, but it's useful to feel better because you made it. But another part of something, we give a lot of artwork merit because it is new, it's innovative, it's a creative, it's something that people haven't done before. And so creativity kind of plays right into that. Being innovative is creative. You're literally creating, not just copying, but creating. So yeah, this is creativity. I guess I kind of moved into art and creativity. They don't mean the same thing, but they are a big part. They share some similarities. But anyway, point number two on creativity specifically is making something from nothing for a specific purpose. That's my definition that I inserted there. You take nothing and you make it into something. That's literally the act of creating something. And yes, you have to gather materials and then create it, but you start with nothing, and then at the end you have a thing. But also creativity in a pure definition, it is functional, it is conceptual, it is also emotional. So again, you have a problem, you create a functional thing. You have an invention that fixes that. That's creativity. You have something that's not being communicated, or so you're learning more things and you come up with a new concept. Well, that's a creation of an idea, right? And then there's also emotional or subconscious creativity. So you take I guess your thoughts and your feelings and you cultivate them into something uh, innovative. Like I said, I don't know, all this is shared, but yeah, it's making something, taking nothing and making it into something. So what are the traits of creativity? Now, I think there's a lot of stereotypes around creativity, that it's like it's a person who's out there, or sort of frilly or foofy. A lot of times it's like they there's this idea that they don't want to do things the way that they are done normally, and so they're more creative. I don't know. That's this sort of like type B personality stereotype, and that's not really all there is to creativity. Yes, there's some traits like that in creativity, but at the end of the day, lots of really type A, very straightforward people, disciplined people are also creative, right? They're creating, inventors, engineers, people like that. Yeah, even artists, can, I don't know. It's a real bad stereotype to think that artists are just sort of sitting around waiting until they feel like doing something. Sometimes creative people are actively doing it every day. But in any case, the traits here that I want to enumerate are the ability to make numerous ideas, some original, and then analyze and select promising possibilities. So basically, taking a bunch of different ideas, putting them through a sieve and coming up with the best possibilities of like solutions or something like that, or reactions to it. But then there's the opposite, right? These are both there. That is conversion, but there's also diversion. So you take a problem or a set of problems and you spread them out and you start to say, what are all the connections? What are all the possible things that relate to this problem? And you go the other way, you funnel out. And both of these things are common traits of creativity. So yeah, the ability to analyze unrelated things and put them together, or the ability to take one problem and connect them to other unrelated things, right? Vice versa. Conversion versus diversion. So yeah, and again, this is where I kind of get into like avoiding the stereotype of artists are not just always playful. Sometimes they are, but other times we have very concentrated, intense work cycles. That are very focused and pointed and purposeful, right? Now, this is a little bit different, and a lot of times type A might not fit in this, but sometimes remaining open to new experiences, taking risks, not being restricted by conventional solutions and knowledge. That's very important. That's probably the most important trait of creativity. Basically, thinking outside the box. Same idea. Okay, so not sure what's going. Oh, now question. You obviously can't answer, but can you learn creativity? Pause. Think. Now we're going to pop in if you paused and thought about it. I don't know. Just in conversation, I usually talk about my personal take on creativity is that it can be learned. Obviously, a lot of people have it in them, but it can also be cultivated. The more you do it, the more you create, the more inventive you can become. I kind of like to think of creativity as almost like sports, right? The At the end of the day, lots of people walk in, seventh grade or eighth grade, whenever they start sports, and they say, or a lot of people start earlier than that, but there are people with clear natural talent. There are people with clear natural creativity. However, LeBron James did not get to the NBA by just floating on natural sportsmanship, and you can't do that with creativity either. If you just take your natural creativity and let it sit, it's not necessarily going to grow. You can cultivate it and you can grow it, and that's how you really become like a deeply meaningful creative person. And that said, there's also a ton of people who, it was Scottie Pippen, not so great. He was like, okay, in high school, boom, whatever. And then I guess this is sort of a natural thing, but, he got to college and he grew, became a giant and then became this, like, of course, very successful NBA player. I do a lot of basketball. I played basketball. I watch basketball. Well, I don't watch it a ton, but I know about it. But in any case, I use lots of sports analogies. I was an athlete through most of school and in college, so in any case, I sort of see sports like that. You can, if you're not creative but you want to be, you can cultivate it. You can make it into something. You can find your creativity. You can learn it, in my opinion. Now, my opinion's not everything, so I don't know. Just think about yours. So now, oh, and I also, what was the first question? About art. Do you think you can? I'm going to go back a little. No. Do you think you can get everything from a piece of art in 1 second, or do you have to stay with it? That kind of feeds into this question. I was going to save that for later too. If you wrote that down, the answer is both. Sometimes you see a piece of art and it's instantly, that's meaningful to you. You can feel it. There are other times where a piece of art, I always note that, like, my favorite albums, my favorite music, it's never my favorite when I first listen to it. It takes listening, it takes deeper understanding, it takes like spending some time with it. And I think art is like that. So I once heard a stat that said something like the average amount of time a person at a museum looks at a piece of art is like 2.5 seconds or something like that, which is crazy. So obviously there needs to be something to get you to pay attention to that, or you just like walk right by it or whatever. But at the same time, it is an interesting thing to think about what would happen if people did have to spend more time with specific. Would it get more, or is the fact that they just walk by it, does that pretty much tell you what you need to know? I don't know. It's an interesting question. I kind of think the answer is both, that you can enjoy something immediately, or you can spend more time with it and get more out of it. But in any case, last slide for today, all about perception. I have to now like kind of undercut a lot of, or at least kind of talk about the fact that this is a very open-ended and tough course to teach, because at the end of the day, we all perceive things differently. We all think of things differently. We perceive things similarly in ways as well, but at the end of the day, there are infinite variations. We all have two eyes, we all have a nose, ears, all that stuff. But some of us, I don't know, we lose them, or we can be born without them, or they work in a different way that changes them significantly. But also, every person's eyes work a little bit different. We have different, I wear glasses. Some people don't wear glasses. Some people are colorblind. Some people aren't. All these things lead to incredible variation. Oh yeah, this goes back to the question, do you have to spend time with things? I think you can spend time being creative. You can spend time with art, and it can cultivate uh, what your experience is. It can develop it. It can get deeper and more meaningful, or it can be very direct. Like right now, real quick, I'm going to ask you to look at this beautiful art piece and think of some words that come to mind when you look at this. Simple piece. A lot of people think like silky. It's obviously black and white. It's not colorful. There's a lot of shadow. It looks soft, but it also looks sort of uh, organic. It looks like fabric, but it looks like something else. In any case, and this is like very effective if you're ever watching this, or I'm giving you this slide and the slide is really big in front of you. It kind of looks like drapery and all these things. But at the end of the day, we can look at it. If you've still been looking at this, you've already started to see more details and more things, and maybe you figured out what this is. But some people are often surprised when I say that it's just a cabbage leaf, a close-up picture of a cabbage leaf. Some of you already figured that out. Other people get really caught up on like it being drapery. Is there something under there? I don't know, but it's an interesting idea that this artist Edward Weston has taken a cabbage leaf, changed our perception of it, and added complexity of light and shadow, lack of color, texture, drama, all these things, and changed our perception of this thing. In any case, yeah, perception plays a big part in art. So that kind of rounds out chapter one. So let me go ahead and hit pause. Thank you for sticking with me today. Hopefully, yeah, it's less than 40 minutes. That's not too bad for a day's lecture, less than a regular lecture class. That's chapter one. So yeah, cool. I'm again really not bad at this. Email me if you have any questions about this lecture. Thank you.